Thanks for joining us for Issues and Answers. I'm Ian Boyne. The issue we are discussing today is security. We have with us the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Peter Bunting. Thank you so much for your company. Minister, good to have you again. You have often stated that a lot of the murders are concentrated in particular geographic areas, Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James. Because this is so, Minister, shouldn't that make your job easier? Isn't it easier to target those areas, to do the intelligence, and to round up these criminals? Why is that so intractable?
Well, although it's in these three parishes, unlike Kingston and St. Andrew, where the hotspots tend to be concentrated in very limited geographic areas, in specific communities, what you find in the West is that the criminal activities and the murders are taking place in a much more dispersed manner. So you go into sparsely populated rural communities. Scammers go there particularly because there's not a heavy police presence in those areas. So anywhere literally that they have phone signal, they can go and conduct their criminal operations from. And they tend to want to stay out of sight and out of view. So unlike the traditional gang on gang type of warfare or extortion, which was focused in a very concentrated commercial district, the scamming operates in a quite distinct way.
Which is why intelligence is even more crucial for the police.
Absolutely.
In that
Absolutely.
area.
And what I will say is that we're working on some technical solutions as well, which I won't speak to the detail of that, but that will help provide us with that type of intelligence that we need to target and disrupt the scamming operations.
Okay. Minister, you recently announced a new law and order, I think, committee, an oversight committee similar to EPOC and ESET. Just the rationale of this and how this will help in our current challenge.
Okay, well, it's actually referred to as the Rule of Law Working Group. And you'll recall that when the Partnership Council was established, there were a number of areas that it was going to look at. Right. The first was the economy and job creation, and EPOC sort of corresponds roughly to those two areas of focus. Then ESET deals with the energy diversification and reduction in cost, but the issues to do with security and justice really didn't have a parallel mechanism. So when we met at the Partnership Council retreat over the summer, the idea was floated that perhaps we need a corresponding group of the partnership looking at this area, because it was so critically important and in a sense cannot be separate or discrete from the other two, because they all impact on each other. And I welcome that idea, because I want to do anything I can to take security, justice, the whole rule of law out of the partisan political arena. And we see where EPOC, for example, has brought a certain objectivity, a certain soberness, a certain impartiality to the discussion around the performance of the economy. And similarly, we hope, or I hope, that this will also be what the Rule of Law Working Group will bring to the whole area of security and justice. And if I could just share with you some of the terms of reference, for example, it says to monitor the progress of the initiatives designed to improve adherence to the rule of law and reform of the justice system, because this is not just security but justice, and to assess the challenges being faced, to identify potential or existing roadblocks to the successful implementation of initiatives, to communicate quarterly with the PFJ, the Partnership for Jamaica National Council in particular, and periodically with the public at large on the progress achieved, and to also facilitate the whole process of addressing challenges and mobilizing resources. So I think this is an important development. I think the social contract that the partnership represented, the partnership agreement represented, has been effectively brought to bear on the economy and on our deliberations and planning around energy reinvestment. And I am hopeful that the same sort of broad coalition of well-thinking groups across Jamaica will be brought to this era as well.
And you will draw from people in the Bar Association, people who are in criminology,
Precisely.
experts. You will
Precisely. So the chairman has been announced, Mr. Howard Mitchell.
Yes.
He's a lawyer of decades standing.
That's right.
He's also the vice president of the Jamaica Manufacturers Association. And I think he will bring, he has a lot of experience chairing both public and private sector boards.
He's a known achiever, yes.
And the other members will be nominated by the various stakeholder groups that comprise the partnership.
Okay.
But we have already identified, for example, a leading academic who is very strong in the area of criminal justice and who will also support the group from a technical standpoint. The unions, the other civil society groups, the private sector, they will all nominate their persons. We will probably also invite, whether as members per se or as invitees to support, perhaps police, retired police personnel who might have certain skills.
Retired judges.
We might bring retired judges. Certainly a representative from the Bar Association, I would expect to be on it. And of course, representatives from the JCF and JDF.
Yes. Minister of National Security, the Honorable Peter Bunting, talking to us about initiatives to strengthen the security of the country. We take a break, but we'll be right back.
It's been 11 months.
7 years. 12 years.
Since I became the most important person in the world.
It's a big responsibility to know that her future is in our hands.
I have to tell him and show him that he is my number one. I want to prepare them for life's journey. So as them grow, them know the difference between right and wrong.
I gotta make sure that we keep him out of bad company. Because if I don't raise him right, the streets are gonna raise him. I feel, she feel.
If me stumble, him fall. Knowing I'm responsible for their future and they're responsible for Jamaica's future.
So I won't give up or allow her to quit. I'm gonna make sure I'm safe on the straight and narrow.
Me prefer to tell them no now than watch them regret it later.
Because to the world, I'm just another person. But to my child, I'm the whole wide world.
Hello, I am Grace McLean, Chief Education Officer of the Ministry of Education. I would like to fully endorse the Issues and Answers program.
I plead through this medium that people must understand that we have to be much more efficient.
Congratulations to GIS and Issues and Answers, which is really to provide the Jamaican public with information, tangible information about different kinds of activities within the government of Jamaica. And I sincerely hope that this program will continue to grow from strength to strength.
Issues and Answers, every Sunday during Jamaica Magazine on this station.
Minister of National Security, the Honorable Peter Bunting, is our guest. Minister, the issue of justice and the justice system is so closely aligned to security. What have been those steps, initiatives, legislative actions that have been taken to boost national security?
Well, perhaps I'm fortunate that the Minister of Justice for decades was my partner in the private sector.
Yes.
And I've got a tremendous amount of support from him, particularly as chairman of the Legislative Committee of Cabinet. So we have passed more, landmark legislation over these past 4 years than I think has been passed for a long time before. We have had the anti-gang legislation.
Very important.
A groundbreaking, and we've arrested 200 and odd gangsters under that piece of legislation in the year and a half or so that it has been passed. We have the anti-lottery scam legislation, and that has, again, hundreds of persons, probably over 1,000 persons now have been arrested, and scores convicted already have passed through the system and been convicted under that piece of legislation. We have amended the Proceeds of Crime Act, the POCA. We have strengthened it. We have put in limits on cash transactions, for example, so we are able to combat organized crime, not just from getting the direct evidence of their criminal activities, but we're now able to go after their efforts to launder the money and their efforts to conceal the assets that they've purchased. And we have actually detained billions of dollars in assets and in cash. Yes. Working with the FID, MOCA and FID have detained, I think, somewhere in the region of $3 billion right now as we speak. That will, on successful forfeiture, come into the consolidated fund and will be available for use to strengthen our law enforcement system, or at least some of those funds will be available for use. And finally, the piece of legislation I think is very important is the DNA legislation.
Yes.
And that I think is going to be very helpful in identifying perpetrators, particularly in some forms of crime, some of the rapes and abuse of our children, young girls in particular, where you sometimes have difficulty getting the victim to come forward and give evidence for a whole host of understandable reasons. Now it will make it much easier to convict these perpetrators because you'll be able to use the forensic evidence. You will be able to compel them to give you a DNA sample that the investigators can then match with either the residue that they've left, or that they can, if there is a child born from an underage girl, then they can match, do a paternity test, so to speak, and on the basis of the outcome of that test alone, they would have sufficient evidence to move for a conviction.
Yeah. Minister, you have distinguished yourself by taking an integrated, holistic approach to security, not just policing. Your Unite for Change program is really a game-changing program. Why do you think this approach, this philosophical approach to security is so important?
Well, before the camera started rolling, I was sharing with you a quote that I read by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist priest, a Buddhist peace activist, a Buddhist monk rather, who was a peace activist during the time of the Vietnam War. And he said at the time, and I quote, was that what was needed was not another doctrine, not another communism or capitalism, but what was needed was a spiritual reawakening. In many ways, I think that statement could be applied to our present time in Jamaica. While we may, in the short term, need to apply additional strategies to combat crime, additional strategies or additional investment to improve our capability, longer term, medium to long term, the only thing that's going to be successful is a change in changing the dysfunctional elements of our culture, re-establishing or repairing the breakdown in critical social institutions like the family, returning to the days when we looked at school not just as an opportunity to deliver a curriculum, but to socialize and to make gentlemen and ladies of citizens of those who pass through those schools. Some schools, let me say, are still doing a good job at that, but we need it to be universal. And that, I believe, if we can build that broad coalition, if we can get the church on board, if we can get civil society groups, if we can get our educational system aligned with it, and as I said, most important, going back to family, and so that we don't have so many of our young boys and girls, but particularly our young boys, growing up without a male role model in their lives. Then I think if we can repair that, then I think we have established a foundation for sustainable reduction in crime and violence.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister of National Security, the Honorable Peter Bunting, talking to us about areas under his portfolio. We thank you for your company. Next week I'll be back. Until then, Ian Bourne wishing you a pleasant day.